Thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about Project Healing Waters, and fly fishing is something that I have a real passion for. I started fly fishing back in '91 when a friend of mine took me out at lunch and said, "Have you ever fly fished before? Let's go out and try this." And that's when I gave up doing any other kind of fishing. So for me, fly fishing's been a lot of fun, a lot of frustration as you're learning a new process, and, but really a great deal of fun. And I found it to be very relaxing, and it requires a tremendous amount of concentration, which is what Project Healing Waters, we capitalize on that requirement to concentrate, to show how it can be relaxing and sort of meditative. So I became involved with Project Healing Waters back in 2016. I retired in 2016. I was getting my health care through the VA, but also doing some volunteer work. And in the Disabled American Vets Lounge, I was driving for the DAV at the time. And I saw this flyer that was hung up and said, do you want to learn about fly fishing? Do you want to learn how to tie flies? Well, I already knew how to do those things, but I thought, this is going to be a lot of fun hanging around with other veterans who share the passion or want to share the passion but don't know how to do it. Maybe I can help. So I started as a participant and became a volunteer after a couple of years. So I kind of share a dual role as a volunteer and participant. A lot of our volunteers come from the participant ranks. The only qualification for being a participant in Project Healing Waters is to have some level of service-connected disability or to be active duty, or for those folks who are in that process, or they've filed their claim, but they're just waiting for determination of their disability classification. So we say wounded and disabled vets, active duty. So that's a little bit about me. I became an assistant program lead for a short period of time, and now I'm a program lead here. So I've been involved with Project Healing Waters for about 6 years in total. For those of you who don't know and haven't heard about Project Healing Waters, we are dedicated to the physical and emotional rehab of disabled active duty and again, those who are waiting their transition from or determination on their letter. So we're doing that through fly fishing activities. So that's anything including we run fly fishing classes on casting. We do some fly tying, and we also do some rod building, and we're bringing rod building to the Twin Cities this year as well. So that's a little bit about Project Healing Waters, what our mission statement is, and we are a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. We started in 2005 at Walter Reed Army Medical Center out in Washington. Official name was established in 2006, and we incorporated in the state of Maryland in 2007. We currently have 233 different programs across the country, and we're working with folks in 45 different states. We're managed at a local level by volunteers and people like me who decided to step up and become program leads. We work with all the VA facilities, Department of Defense, through the Warrior Transition Units, and a lot of other institutions as well. We're regionally divided into 19 different regions across the country, which is really kind of cool. So we're a large organization. We're totally run by volunteers. We've got a board of directors, board of trustees, not board of directors, board of trustees, and some elected officers. They're responsible for the strategic oversight, operationally and budgetary. We've got an administrative staff located in Maryland that helps out with the volunteer leadership and getting us all organized. An important thing to note is that we're not a membership organization. We're not a membership organization. We refer to all our affiliate organizations, the 233 different organizations across the country, as programs. We're not chapters, we're not clubs. As soon as you associate a chapter or club with an organization, that implies some kind of membership. There's no membership. So that's an important thing to know. We are rely on the generosity of private and corporate donors. So we solicit funds from foundations, including some government funding we receive. We draw our volunteers from a lot of different places, but we're affiliated with Fly Fishers International, clubs around the country, Trout Unlimited, and a lot of independent clubs as well. And we get our participants, a lot of them come through the VA, a lot of them come through Warrior Transition Units and other Department of Defense employees. They help us recruit our participants. So we're divided into two different classifications, participants and volunteers. So every program that we have is run by a program lead, and I kind of coordinate the activities locally, and I'm responsible to and helped out by a regional coordinator. My regional coordinator is in Chicago. And so again, we do fly fishing education. So we talk about bugs and reading rivers and lakes and where you're going to find the fish. We do fly tying, fly casting, fly rod building, and then we coordinate fishing outings where we'll actually go out and participate on a lake or on a river. In 2020, interestingly enough, the COVID year, and I was surprised when I saw these numbers. The numbers are, I guess, almost unbelievable, but they're reported at 259,488 hours donated by over 4,295 Project Healing Waters volunteers. So we've helped more than 9,765 disabled veterans and disabled active military service personnel to participate in our programs at the local level. And it's important to know that there's never any cost associated with any of the things that we're doing to our participants. So that's a little bit about Project Healing Waters. If you want to know more about Project Healing Waters, you can jump on the website, projecthealingwaters.org, and check out the awesome videos that we've got. So we've got some really moving testimonials that have been put out and shared on the website. So my agenda for today, I wanted to talk a little bit about Project Healing Waters, which I did. I want to talk about why fly fishing in particular is successful, both physically and emotionally. And I know Tom Boss is going to talk later about the meditation, and I'll deal with the meditative qualities of fly fishing as well today in my discussion. And then I want to share a look at some adaptive equipment that we use when we go out on the rivers and lakes. So we've talked about Project Healing Waters, and I want to talk about why fly fishing is so good and so much fun, and provides that emotional and physical healing that in the whole reason behind Project Healing Waters. Now, understand that the military's got one of the finest training organizations in the world, and we do a really great job of spinning young people up to go out and be warriors. Problem is that it's impossible to reverse that process. People have tried for decades to reverse that process. And what I've come to realize, and I'm sure others will tell you this as well, is that those experiences that we've had become part of the very fabric of our being. And as such, it's just impossible to remove those things. So we come back from deployment conditioned to be in this heightened state of awareness or stress, always believing that we're in some sort of danger. And that's almost the very definition of PTS, isn't it? So when we sense danger, and some of the medical professionals will have much more detailed description of this, but when we sense danger, brain sends out signals to our adrenal gland, produces adrenaline, raises our heartbeat and blood pressure. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a constant state of increased heartbeat and high blood pressure is just not good for you. So at the same time that's happening, signals sent to our pituitary gland produces cortisol, which is, of course, the stress hormone. So none of those things are good when they're experienced on a daily basis. So the question becomes, how do we interrupt that whole process? So in 2005, Harvard Medical School published an article in their newsletter's called On the Brain. And they described fly fishing as a meditative activity shown to be effective in actually relaxing that brain, stopping it from being in that heightened state of awareness, producing adrenaline, causing the production of cortisol. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, if you just Google Harvard Medical School On the Brain and look for that article. It was published again in 2005. So what we've seen is that once the veteran experiences that relaxation through participation in our activities and realizes maybe for the first time in years, they haven't thought about all the negative experiences that they've had. This becomes kind of that teaching, learning moment for them. And they realize that they do have some control over that particular situation. We take them out of what's been bothering them, and we make them concentrate so hard on fly fishing, line management. It's a two-handed activity. And during that learning process, we'll have one of our volunteers standing behind them and coaching them and talking about all the different things that they have to pay attention to. So they nothing else gets in their head. And it's an amazing at the end of an hour and a half session of them learning how to cast a fly rod. I'll ask, I say, so how long have we been doing this? Give me an idea of how long do you think? I've never had anybody say, well, we've been at it for an hour. I'll hear them say, half an hour, 45 minutes. Now, we've been standing for 90 minutes. And you may get somebody say 45 minutes. So what did you think about that entire time? So I didn't think about anything except you standing behind me, barking these orders at where do I hold my right arm and what do I do with my left arm? And how do I stand and stop breaking my wrist? And all of those kinds of things. So when I tell them it's been an hour and a half, then they stop and they realize it's like, man, I just have not thought about anything else. And that's that moment where they say, I can do this. I want to come and I want to experience this again. And once they start coming, that's when they got them hooked. If I can get them there that second time, I've got them hooked. Well, no pun intended, since we're talking about fishing activities. But now they know that they can escape from that, and they can actually take this stuff home and do it on their own. So this is a big deal for them. And I just love seeing the reaction when they finally make that realization. And it's just an amazing thing. The light goes on and you can actually see it, and they get a big smile on their face, and it's like, man, I know that I can do this. This is going to be really cool. So it provides the why. Why do volunteers come out and do this? Why did we spend as many hundreds of thousands of hours doing this in a COVID year? So it gives us as volunteers that compensation, if you will. We volunteer because we want to help, but it's always good to get that feedback from them. So I personally have had people tell me, Dave, this program actually saved my life. I've been sitting with, you'll have to excuse me because I get a little emotional when I recall these stories. Been sitting with a gun in my hand in my basement, and I was close, And I thought, I'm going to try this. I heard about this. I saw this at the VA. A mental health professional sent me this way, and this program saved my life. Spouses have come and said, my husband's a different man. My wife is different. They're happier. They've got some reason to get up and do something. And that's just an amazing feeling. So it's such a wonderful thing for volunteers. As a Vietnam veteran myself, I've experienced all of those things, and including, I don't know, I guess we'll call it PTS. Hard to say. That was 50 odd years ago, so it's really fun and gratifying for us as volunteers. So I want to talk about our adaptive equipment. We do have a variety of equipment to help the veterans participate in our activities. And a veteran should never, ever feel as if fly fishing, or fly tying for that matter, is beyond their capabilities. I've yet to run across anyone who hasn't been able to participate in something that we're doing. They might not be able to participate in everything that we do, but there's some part of this Project Healing Waters and some part of these activities that they're going to be able to participate. We always do our best to accommodate the special abilities that they have and make the participation as fun and enjoyable as possible. So I will talk. Oh, where did I put my rod? Oh, here it is. Never mind. You'll have to excuse me. I got so much equipment on the table here. I'm gonna do this in a particular order. First thing I want to talk about is what's called a tenkara rod, and this is a fly rod that it telescopes out, collapsed down. It's about, I think this one is 26 or 27 inches long. It telescopes out to 12 feet. It is considered a fly rod, even though it doesn't have a reel on it. So it's 12 feet of line, or excuse me, 12 feet of rod, 12 feet of line, and about 5 feet of tippet or leader. You might recognize it as leader. So there isn't any need for somebody to learn how to cast, which is not something that you can do. It's not the same as fishing with gear fishing. Learning to handle a fly rod and line management takes a little bit of work and a little bit of effort, but they can jump on a tenkara rod in their first outing and actually participate in fly fishing. So I find this really effective with participants who may have some issues with their short-term memory. And we have a lot of those folks who've got TBI issues, and the more simple we can make it, the less they have to remember, the easier it is for them, and the more fun it is. So, no need to learn a lot of different things. Folks remember the old cane poles that were maybe 2, 3, 4 sections long. They were connected with little brass connectors that held the two together, had a loop on one end, and you'd go fishing. So this is real similar to that. Does require a little bit of casting skill, but not anything that folks can't handle relatively quickly. Second thing I'll talk about is what I call an auto reel. And the auto reel, I'll hold that up to the camera as best I can, allows folks to pull line out, and then it's as simple as pushing the lever up, and then that retrieves the line. So again, it helps a little bit with the casting, certainly with the retrieving. So there's no crank on the side, and this is a really nice option for some folks who may have limited use of a hand or an arm, maybe some neuropathy, and they can't feel with their fingers. This is a nice alternative. We also have, I'll set this one down here. We have what's known as the receive all. This was originally designed for folks with limited use of their hands, and it was designed to hold things like kitchen utensils. So they'd have 2 or 3 of these, and this actually comes apart with a lever on the side, so that they can easily mount the lower unit, one part of it to a knife, a different one maybe to a large serving spoon or soup spoon, those kinds of things. And it's simply, arm goes through. So we use this for people with a limited use of a hand. And this is either left or right hand, it doesn't matter. We just mount the fly rod to it using zip ties, and arm goes through, it gets connected, and a strap goes over the top, over the hand, strap goes over the forearm, and now, regardless of how much strength they have in their hand, get this tied on here a little bit tighter, regardless of how much strength they have in their hand, they can now work a fly rod and cast a fly rod. Does give you access to the reel, so it's good from that standpoint. So again, if they have limited use of one of their arms or one of their hands, this is a viable alternative, providing they've got good use of the other one. So the last one that I have, and it's my, I don't know, it's my favorite, because what this one does, what this last one does, is it allows folks who have loss of an entire limb, loss of an arm, loss of a hand, who know that fly fishing really requires 2 hands. This one, and I'll have to stand up and show you, this is part of this harness. This is going to be the difficult part, and I practiced this on the camera earlier today. So I've got this plate, mounts around, and there's a little part that sticks out. I don't know if you can see that very well. And this fly rod has been, I don't want to say modified, there's another device that holds the reel onto the reel seat, and it will be hard to see that. So this slides right on, and now I've got, if I've lost my left arm, I can pull the line out, pull as much line out as I'm going to cast, comes right off, and I can cast the fly rod. And then when I'm ready to start to retrieve, this pops right back on. And now I can start to retrieve, and we retrieve a fly line by looping this over your hand, and that actually pulls the fly line in, giving the fly some action, either on the surface or subsurface, or we get the opportunity to reel that fly line in. And then you just repeat the same process all over. So they can fight the fish with one hand and reel. I've actually seen people leave this on and take this fly line. As they're fighting the fish, they'll reel some in, or they'll pull some in, and they'll use their teeth to hold that. These folks become very resourceful when it comes to having, especially when they're having some fun activities. They'll do some of the craziest things, and a lot of it's because this is what they've become accustomed to doing. They've made their own adaptations to their particular environment. So they'll use whatever's available to reach the goal. If the goal is to catch more fish. turn my other equipment back on here. So that's, again, this is kind of my favorite. It is it's called RexFly. These things are commercially available. We were given a grant by the VA to procure this adaptive equipment for all the programs across the country, and we're certainly grateful for that. So that's my presentation on adaptive equipment. I stand ready to take any questions. I had planned on the entire process taking about half an hour, so I'm available for any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you so much, David. This has been great, especially some of these demonstrations. If anyone has a question, feel free to either put it in the chat box or you can unmute and ask.
Hey, David, I have a question about waders. We had someone, we did a women's veterans fly fishing retreat last summer, and we had a woman with a prosthetic leg. She put on a pair of our hip boots and got the leg stuck in the boot. So I've been on a search to try to find adaptive waders, and what I'm finding is basically if we go with like the neoprene hip boots and just have a bunch of different sizes of boots, that's probably the best option because they don't make a specific adaptive wader.
Right. So I was at the Fly Fishing Expo in March and talked to a couple of different veterans who are fly fishers, and both had prosthetic lower legs below the knee. So I asked him, I said, so what do you do for waders? I want to know what you do. And he said, you know, I just don't. He said, I don't do waders. I tried waders, and he had what's called the stocking foot waders. And then he had one boot, and he said he tried the other boot, and it's difficult to fit because of his particular prosthetic foot and the action of the ankle and trying to get the boot in and everything else. And he said the worst part was, he said, I was able to get the boot to fit. The worst part is that in those stocking foot waders, and the way that his prosthetic is made is that he actually wore a hole in the bottom of that stocking foot wader. So, you know, of course, when you do that, then that half of your wader fills up with water. Right. He said, I just don't. So are there adaptive waders? You know, there's not. And the hard part is trying to figure out what's right. And that may be dependent on the type of prosthetic that they're using. And even the stocking foot waders, you can't just limit yourself to buying different size boots, because the stocking foot waders come in all those different sizes. I shouldn't say all those different sizes. That'll come in probably 2, 3, 4 different sizes. So it's almost like it's gonna. I don't want to say it's impossible to find where an organization can put in a level of stock and say, well, we can provide waders for everybody. But the stocking foot waders, the ones that are almost like long johns, where you can collapse everything down and fit it over a prosthetic. But if you're using the ones that have like a boot that's attached to the waders, we tried that down at Whitewater in 2019. We had an individual who had prosthetics on both feet, and we just couldn't get them in. Well, we probably could have really forced them in, but we would have had to destroy the waders and cut them off. That was the bad part. So that's a tough one. It's really a tough one. You almost have to get them so involved with fly fishing and that they want to go out and make the investment and buy their own, and then they can search for the right thing.
Yeah, that was what Sim said, that they can do custom made, but they're kind of spendy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
question. First, thank you for this presentation. It's great. So my fiance and I are super into fly fishing, but neither of us are veterans. And so I'm just curious, can people who are not veterans volunteer?
Absolutely. I love my volunteers. Without the volunteers, there's just no way that we could do this. It would just be impossible. I'm the only individual in a leadership position here, and to be able to handle the number of veterans that we served. Last year, the 2019 was the last year that we were actually at the VA hospital, and we served 193 veterans and put in well over 800 hours of volunteer work. I wouldn't have been able to do that. And we were out there 2 times a month, and then we go to the mental health unit, the bridge to recovery once a month, and then out at the VA daycare center. So volunteers are just a critical piece. So it's a matter of finding a program in an area that's close enough for you to reach and getting signed up. There is a registration process. It's not a difficult registration process, but it's a process where we take some basic information, and it's what we use as a means of communication, and keeps track of all the volunteer hours. It sends reports to individuals of their volunteer hours, and more importantly, selfishly, saves me a lot of time, and I don't have to keep track of who volunteered and how many hours we put in, and then send those reports to corporate on a quarterly basis. They just pull the information right off the system. So happily take participants. I'm always looking for participants first. I'm always looking for volunteers secondly, and then I'm out doing my best to recruit funds for support of my program here in Minneapolis. So just depending on where you live, and right now we don't have a program down in southeastern Minnesota. Minneapolis is about as close as we're going to get. We just opened up one over in Wisconsin. I think we opened about one in Sparta, but that's really not even close either. We recognize that southeastern Minnesota is a hole in our territory. So Rochester, Winona, that area, if we could find somebody willing to take on the responsibilities of being a program lead, I'm sure corporate would at least have some serious discussions about putting one in down there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll talk to my fiance and see what his thoughts are. That sounds like he would enjoy that.
Sure. Anything else?
So there's a comment.
David.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Brian Lynch from Mayo Clinic. Thanks a lot. This was an exciting presentation, and I fished a lot in my life, and I never fly fished, but I definitely have to try. It looks exciting. So one of my questions for you is, I do a lot of work with connecting kids with mental health concerns or obesity with community, out in nature. But one thing that I've struggled with is how much does it help to have people in social groups versus not? And what have you noticed with your fly fishing experience with people who either do it more individually or in groups, or is it always in groups? And if so, do you think that also helps make the experience more meaningful and helpful?
I don't think there's any doubt that the folks who come together for that camaraderie. I've taken vets out of the hospital for a few hours of fishing, and what they'll tell me is, I didn't come here to fish. I came here to be with the rest of you guys. And so it's a really important component to it. There is a lot of time to be, I guess, do things on your own. Fly tying at home is a great example of that. And from what I've heard and what I've experienced for myself, being able to have that quiet time where my brain isn't working on something other than tying a couple of pieces of feather and some shiny stuff to a hook, and it's surprising how relaxing that can be. But I think by and large, the folks would much rather come together and do that in a group, tie in a group. It gives us that camaraderie that we miss so much. That's the toughest part about transitioning out of the military is I was with my tribe, and now I'm not. I'm alone. So to find something like this, or a program like this, Project Healing Waters, or other veterans kinds of programs, really helpful to be back with members of my tribe. It's good for us. And you should really try fly fishing. For those of you who have some interest in fly fishing and would consider volunteering, we have groups of people, I shouldn't say groups, numbers of folks who come to me and say, I'd like to volunteer. I'm looking for a good volunteer opportunity, but I don't know how to fly fish. I don't know how to tie a fly. Well, guess what? We teach you too. We'll help you out. And one of the things that I tell people, especially at the VA, is we'll teach you how to tie one fly, just one, and that's all you need. And they'll say, well, one fly. So well, that's one more than the person you're going to sit across and help tie. And to see the look on somebody's face when they walk away with one fly, just one, it's amazing. I'll tell you a little story about a fellow that I was working with at the VA daycare center. His name was Floyd, former Army. He was probably in his maybe late 70s, early 80s. Had a stroke, so he had no use of his right arm. And he came to us and he said, "I want to tie a fly." So, well, we don't have anything to help you out. I mean, it takes two hands to tie a fly. And I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll be the right hand and you can be the left hand. And we're going to tie just this simple fly. It's called a foam frog, and it requires about 3 different things that you tie on a hook. And it should take about 7 minutes to tie this fly for somebody who's even inexperienced. So we spent over an hour, and we tied one. We spent over an hour to tie one 7-minute fly. We laughed so hard at each other, and he said, I kept trying to tell my right hand, he's thinking that this is his right hand. I kept trying to tell my right hand to do something, and it just wouldn't. I said, Floyd, I don't know why you would think that this would be your right hand, because he was African American, and clearly I'm not. I said, let's hold our hands up, and he held his hand up next to mine. He said, I didn't even pay attention to the difference between the color of our skin. He said, I was trying to make your fingers do something, and my brain just wasn't connecting with yours. I said, well, I was trying to make yours do the other thing too. Now that we got one fly tied, but the most joyful thing about that was this may have been the first time that he'd laughed almost solid for an hour, and I don't know how many years. And he came back. He came back again the following quarter when we came back, and he said, I've been waiting for this. To me, that speaks volumes for what we did with Project Healing Waters on that specific day for that one specific individual. Absolutely fabulous. And I almost forgot. Sitting here, we talk about tying. This happens to be something called the evergreen hand. Was invented by an individual in Washington State, and you can actually tie flies with one hand, with one arm. It's an incredible device. Impossible for me to show you how this thing works. It's evergreen, and if you YouTube evergreen hand, you'll watch the inventor. He he and a friend of his spent hours and hours and hours engineering this. It's got the equivalent of a shoulder and a hand, the white part's the hand, and these little things that move around on magnets, they're little clips, alligator clips, little loops that open and close. Almost impossible to show you how that all works. But if you look at evergreen hand, it's not an easy task to tie a fly on this, but I've seen a veteran do this. Yeah, tied a fly on it. And he was so happy that, yeah, it was, to see the joy on his face was rewarding for me, and also rewarding for him to be able to finish that fly. So it can be done. It can be done. Anything else? Somebody else is out there with a question that they don't want to ask. We have 2 programs in Minnesota, one in St. Cloud and one at the Minneapolis VA.
Hi, this is Ruth, and I volunteered quite a bit at the VFW here in Rochester, Minnesota.
Okay.
Pre-pandemic, they had something similar to this for veterans to go in, I think it was once a month or something like that, for to learn to tie flies and, you know, have a community support group. I'm not sure how much further they went than that. I don't know if they took veterans out fishing or not, but they did have the fly tying there. I don't know if they have resumed that since the pandemic or not, but they did have something similar to what you've been discussing.
Ruth, you know what organization ran that?
I do not. It was at the VFW, and they had their meetings on Saturday, or they had their, you know, gatherings on Saturday mornings there. But I do not have any information on who put, you know, who was putting it together, if it was just a group of local veterans or what it was.
My guess is that it was one of the local fly fishing clubs that put that on. And the VFWs have been really supportive of those kinds of activities that include veterans. So I'm sure they went to them and said, we want to have our meetings here. We want to have our veterans show up, and they got it probably got the room for free. Those are the kinds of places that we like to have our evening tying sessions. So, well, hopefully they'll get started again. That'd be good.
That might have been through our Trout Unlimited, and then there's a driftless area fly shop out of Preston. I think I remember hearing something about that.
Yeah, Mel down at the driftless fly shop and down in Preston has been really supportive of us. They're really a good organization. And we're affiliated here with Fly Fishers International. And we are only because we didn't want to limit ourselves to trout. We fish anything and everything. There isn't any kind of fish that you can't catch on a fly rod. It's everything from panfish to sharks. And we're not going to catch any sharks in Minnesota, of course, but they're catching them on the coastal areas.
You catch a muskie.
Sure, absolutely. I've caught catfish and walleyes. You wouldn't think. Everybody thinks that it's trout and it's got to be done in a stream. And everybody, I shouldn't say everyone, but lots of veterans say, "Oh, it looks too difficult." I've seen a river runs through it, and it looks really complicated. Well, it's not as easy as throwing a bobber out there, but it's twice as much fun. It's a challenge. Anything else?
David, I was just going to ask if it's okay if I include your email when I send out some meeting minutes from today, in case
Sure.
anyone has follow-up questions or about the volunteering or anything.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to take any questions, any comments, people looking for information. There's always something that somebody else can point somebody to. Anything else? If not, I guess, Cassie, I'm done. And if anybody does have any follow-up questions, if you're like me, you'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "Oh, I should have asked this." You can include my email address, and happy to answer all questions.
Well, thank you. I'm going to stop recording